So we're going to kind of talk through what these origin requirements are. So really, at the end of the day, what kind of a certificate of origin is it? Are you an importer, an exporter, or a producer? And that's really the first step. And what's interesting about that is Customs is allowing for multiple people to potentially certify: importer, exporter, producer. So that's kind of interesting. The certifier, the first kind of block in that form is the certifier, and that's the company and person signing. So the way we have our form design is you have the company in the upper left-hand corner, and then down at the bottom, you have who is really doing that certification. And we'll get to that point here in a second. We're going to do the exporter as well. If it's, you only need to provide it if it's different than the certifier. What we tell a lot of people is Customs agencies, we see the uniform regs come out, but as any of you who have been involved in trade understand, the government has not always done the best job of communicating what this looks like from port to port. So even though a blank section of this document is okay, in this type of a scenario, if you're the exporter and you're obviously certifying, just fill out both forms. It's not that, or both pieces of data. It's not, you've already done it once. It's not going to hurt anything. And at the end of the day, it may only help you, as especially early on as we work through some of these hiccups that we're going to see at the border as these forms start to come in. So the next piece is producer. One of the things that has remained the same, even from the old NAFTA form to today on USMCA, is if there are multiple producers, stating various is okay. We can provide a list. We can also put available upon request by the importing authorities. This allows you to maintain some confidentiality if you're an exporter and you're selling something that somebody else produced. So that's a positive piece of this as well. Finally, you can also do the importer, name, address. If you don't know the importer, that's okay. It's not necessarily required. If you know it, go ahead and fill it out. If you don't, leave it blank, that's okay. We have description and tariff classification. The tariff classification still needs to be at the 6-digit level. We don't need 10-digit tariff numbers floating around. 6 digits is perfect. Description should be sufficient to relate it to the good covered by the actual certification. So this is really where we get into some nuanced pieces with some of our clients and really walking them through. Some clients like to put part numbers on their form, which makes a lot of sense. You have a part number, you have a description. It's very easy. You look at a commercial invoice, it says part 123. The USMCA certification says part number 123. Life is simple. Where we sometimes get into issues as we get into the weeds of some of these part numbers is that if you're issuing new part numbers often, you have multiple part numbers. If we're not keeping our forms updated, in theory, we could have a situation where now you have part number 456 that's brand new, and you haven't updated your certificate to say part number 456 also qualifies. While I think there might be an argument, especially if it's the exact same part as part number 123, that we could maybe get away with. It's kind of one of those areas that it makes a lot of sense in some areas, but there's definitely some drawback to issuing part number on there. So one of the things that we talk about is we have a lot of clients that have maybe HTS heading groupings, right? Maybe at that 6-digit level, they have a group and it says, all right, for anything that falls on this 6-digit level, this is the general description. That's a really good thing to use. That way you don't have to be so exact that it says part number 123, but you're also not so broad that Customs isn't going to accept something like the word screw. It's not, there's not enough detail there. How do they really know that this applies to this item on the invoice? Because that's really, if someone's going to look at this, that's really what they're trying to do. They're going to say, does the description on the commercial invoice match or at least is similar enough to the description on the certificate? Origin criteria doesn't change from the old NAFTA, so that still needs to be included. If it is a blanket agreement, we do need to include the blanket documentation on here as well. The last piece of this is the authorized signature and date. So it must be signed and dated by the certifier. And really what this is about is, if every time we've given this presentation or something like this, back when it was NAFTA, and we walked people through how do you complete the form, because with the old NAFTA, you might have everything right, but you completed the form wrong, and then your item wouldn't qualify, or you have some issues at the border. So I think not having a form is very valuable in this instance. But one of the things that didn't change is what you're certifying. And it's that you're certifying the goods described in this document qualify as originating, right? That gets back to that question of, do we put any other country of origin items on here? No. And the information contained is true and accurate. It says, I assume responsibility for providing such representations and agree to maintain and present upon request or to make available during a visit some kind of documentation to support the claim. So make sure, another question that we get often is, who can sign it? Who should we accept sign it? What we always look for is, do we think that the person signing it understands what they're signing and has the requisite knowledge to make said agreement? We've seen it a lot where you'll see something like assistant sign their certificates because maybe someone put a bunch through and someone just sat down and signed a bunch of them. Well, do you think that person knows what they're signing and understands the custom side of what this looks like? So we always look for someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be, there is no necessary requirement there, but it's certainly something that we always advise our clients to look for, to make sure that we agree that, okay, this person probably really does understand what they're signing.